Lindy Morelli, who is a canonically recognized Carmelite hermit.
I love you most. So, does this look good, or do you want me to do anything else to adjust
No,
it?
you look fantastic. You look
Okay.
fantastic.
What? Well, good morning, Lindy. It is so good to see you once again. I'm Larry Leopold. I'm a Carmelite, and you're a Carmelite, Lindy. All right, we've begun this wonderful ministry up in Scranton called Lighthouse, right? And what we'd like to do is hear today. You mentioned about this ministry to those who are wrongfully incarcerated. I'm curious. How many people have been wrongfully incarcerated anyway?
Well, I don't know the exact number, but I would think it would be something like 20% or maybe even a little higher. But I think a lot of people that are wrongly convicted they slip under the radar, and people don't know that they're wrongly convicted, because there's two different, I guess in a way you could say there's two different definitions of what it means to be wrongly convicted. There's a person who could be convicted of a crime who, you know, actually in the courts could qualify, and they could file a claim of actual innocence, meaning that they actually are completely innocent by law, and they could make it through the courts, which is very hard to do with that claim. Or there's a lot of people that didn't commit the crime, but they had some other extenuating circumstances, like they were at the scene of the crime, they were related to the supposed victims, or things like that. So there are a lot of people that didn't commit the crime, but they get convicted of a crime, and there's all kinds of extenuating circumstances. And I think that a lot of people slip under the radar, that people don't even know that they're there and they didn't commit the crime, and it's not documented. That type of thing, when it doesn't constitute actual innocence, it isn't really documented very well, to my knowledge.
Well, how did you get involved with this ministry, and why?
Well, I was working in prison ministry for probably 30 years before I even really thought about it very much. And then somebody in my hometown that I had known previous years, I was talking about writing, and he came over to help me with my writing projects. And he had written a book about his own wrongful conviction, and he, I read his story, and it was very harrowing and it turned my life upside down. Actually, it really felt like really something that I had to think about and apply myself to. And then 2 years later, I met somebody else in another state that I became friends with, who I started to advocate for, and started to really learn about his case and learn about all the different things that were involved in it, and really became like an investigator and a forensic person. And I started getting in way over my head in the investigative work, raising money for lawyers and working on the case night and day. I didn't know much about the law. I learned a lot over the years. And I realized that the main reasons for wrongful convictions are because of prosecutorial misconduct, or ineffective counsel from lawyers, or misidentification of eyewitnesses, and junk science, which has to do with, forensic evidence that wasn't processed very well. And there's other reasons, but those are some of the main reasons why this happens often. And I think the general public would be surprised as to how often it actually happens, because if, for instance, I hate to say it, but if a prosecutor or somebody is up for election year, they sometimes want to seal a case, and they get a suspect and they don't really interview any other suspects. That was the case in a couple different instances that I know of, especially if it's like in a rural county or somewhere. Unfortunately, a lot of personal ambition gets into things, and once somebody is convicted, it's extraordinarily hard to get the case overturned. It's desperately hard. And even when a case is overturned, it doesn't necessarily mean the person gets out of prison. Like, I didn't know anything about the law. I thought, oh, good, when a case gets overturned in the court, that means they're scot-free. No, it doesn't. The person might have to go back to trial again and see what happens. They have to resolve it once it gets overturned. So I learned everything about the legal system, about the justice system, about why these things happen. I learned it at great personal cost to myself, and also with great surprise and shock, because in all my years of working in prison ministry, I never asked anybody why they're there. That's kind of like a no-no when you work in prisons. You don't do that. You don't ask people why they're in prison. And nobody approached me and said they were wrongly convicted, although I'm sure several people probably were in all my years. But it's really different when you get to know somebody, and you get to know them as people, and you get to know their character, and you see that they're going through all these terrible, extreme injustices and extreme painful situations. It's really it's kind of a mind-blowing experience to know somebody on a personal level that is going through that. Because both these two people that I mentioned, my friend that wrote the book and my friend that's still in prison, both of these people are really, really wonderful people in character. They're very kind-hearted, they're very wonderful and good, kind people that are not, that haven't had a criminal background, that haven't, done criminal acts, bad criminal acts. So it's pretty mind-blowing, really.
Messages 9 minutes ago.
I'm sorry. Yeah, tell us
Okay.
about. All right.
Sorry, I didn't know where you were.
Okay. Yeah. So it must be absolute hell for the prisoners to be in that situation where they know they're innocent, and yet every other prisoner is saying they're innocent, and so nobody hears them, so that they can almost admit their own innocence without sounding as guilty as everybody else.
Well, most people who are truly wrongly convicted don't go around advertising it. They just carry the burden of it inside their own souls, because they're lumped in with everybody. They're lumped in with all of the people in prison. And when somebody is brought into prison, they're brought immediately into a very hostile environment from the minute they're arrested to the minute they get out. Because when somebody is arrested, I mean, obviously, the police are trying to subdue person whom they think is a criminal. So they have to use, some force. They might throw somebody to the ground. They might, put the handcuffs on too tight. They throw them in a cell. They already think that person is guilty, especially if it's a really serious matter like murder or some other thing like that, which most of the times for wrongful convictions, it's something like that, some very serious crime. And so from the minute they get arrested to the time that they're out of prison, they are treated like every other prisoner. They are, they suffer all the humiliations of prison. And if anybody doesn't know about prison, it's a brutal place. It's like you could just use your imagination. It's the worst place. It's violent. It's unsanitary. It's filthy in every sense of the word, as far as the people that surround you, because it is, quote, the dregs of society. There are most of the people that go to prison belong there in some way, shape, or form. So I don't know if you can just imagine being thrown into that environment. Like my friend said to me once, I couldn't believe the language people use here. Like he was studying for his doctoral degree in physics, and so he got thrown into that situation, and he was like, wow, I couldn't believe how people are here. I mean, it's kind of, I don't even know if anybody can use their imagination to try to picture what it's like. It's just like all goodness and decency goes out of the window by the people that you're surrounded by. I'm not saying that all people are like that. I'm just saying that that's the environment, if that makes any sense.
Oh my, it's hard to even conceive. But you say that some of these individuals that you've been in contact with have risen above that. How did they do
Yeah,
that?
because they, if somebody really knows that they're innocent, they always have they always have that knowledge deep down inside. So when somebody gets into prison, they either, throw in the towel, which I haven't seen anybody. I mean, I'm sure some people do, but most people start fighting for themselves. In one way, shape, or form, they try to keep fighting. I mean, if you're put in that situation, the first thing you do is like, okay, wait a minute, I don't belong here. And you might go for a while thinking, oh, I'll get out in a month or two or a year or whatever. But as it goes on, you realize, wow, it might take a long time. And it comes as a shock to a person's system. Like they usually don't get it resolved, because once they go to trials, a lot of times people go to trial and they're in a very bad situation. They don't have good counsel. The trial is like a fiasco and a farce, usually gets over in a very short amount of time. And it's not a real trial. It's terrible. I mean, the things I've seen, and somebody gets convicted. Once the gavel is slammed and a person is pronounced guilty, it's extraordinarily hard to get out. So like the person's hope just vanishes once they realize like, wow, I'm not getting out in a month. Nobody's going to bail me out. I'm going to trial. My lawyer told me I was going to win, but no, I'm not going to win. I didn't win. And then they go to sentencing, and the gavel slams down again, and they get, okay, you're sentenced to 2 life sentences, or you're sentenced to life without parole, or you're sentenced to 40 to 80 years. And I mean, I don't know if anybody can really use their imagination to think of what that would be like. Like, what would that be like? It happens to women, it happens to men, it happens to youngsters who are not even 18 years old yet. It happens to people with disabilities. It happens to people who are autistic. It happens to people who are blind. So I don't know. To me, it's a very, very serious problem.
Why doesn't the prison system want to address this or correct the wrongfully accused indictments or
I think
convictions?
until Barry Scheck and the people who started the Innocence Project, until they started bringing it to attention of the public, things like this happened a lot. I mean, it probably happened since the beginning of time. Let's think. I mean, Jesus was the wrongly convicted person par excellence, and he was truly innocent. So I mean, from the beginning of time, I'm sure innocent people were convicted of crimes and hanged and burned at the stake and all that kind of stuff. But I just think that, I don't know if it's just something when people get a conviction, they don't want to get it overturned. They're very stubborn. The law is not what you think it is. The law is about who can present a better argument in court. A person might have a good alibi in their case. A person might have, everything that if you were to explain it, it would look like, oh, well, that should go through in court, but it won't go through, because if it's filed a little bit like 2 days later, it won't go through, then the deadline. If something is written wrong in one of the documents, it won't go through. There's all kinds of reasons. So being a good lawyer means that you're a good I don't know what that word is. You're good at rhetoric. I don't mean rhetoric in the bad sense of the word, but you're good at presenting arguments that make sense, that line up. Obviously, if you're a good lawyer, you care about justice too, which there are good lawyers too. There are good lawyers, there are good policemen, there are good everything, just as there are not good, people who do that, who are not doing a good job at it. But all I'm saying is, once a conviction gets, the powers that be do not like to just let go of that like that, because it would, it doesn't look good. You know what I mean? Once a prosecutor or a judge or somebody gets a conviction, like to get it overturned is like, they might have to admit that they made mistakes. I mean, I've read stories where somebody was on death row, wrongly convicted for 30 years. And the governor of that state or nobody apologized to that person or nothing. They just don't want people just don't realize what a big problem it really is. And it's a very, very serious problem, because if it affects one person, it affects everybody. It affects their family members. Family members pretty much, their life is just pretty much, I don't know if you want to say I don't know what to say. It's kind of like put on the burner to burn. You know what I mean? It's just, the family members are just, their savings are eaten up. They put their houses on, they mortgage their houses, they, whatever they do, they empty their bank accounts, then they're broke. And then, then they get health problems, and then they get sick, their family members are clear across the state, like 6 hours away. They can't visit them. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And it goes on for years. And then family members sometimes can't keep up with it. They just can't. They try to, but a lot of times they have to sort of distance themselves just so that they can handle it. You know what I mean? So they don't, because they have other things to do. They usually have children to raise, or they might have other children, they might have a job, they might have a husband at home, they might have a sickness. And a lot of family members just can't handle it, and they just distance themselves. And after a while, people run out of money. If they had money to begin with, most people don't, because most people are usually poor and Black and or have a disability. Most people don't have money to pay lawyers. And it's not true that even if you have money to pay a lawyer, that you get somewhere, because you don't always. So it's a very hard thing to deal with. And if a family member does hang in there, and there are some, I know some very valiant people, especially mothers. Mothers are, champions at hanging in there by their sons, and things like that, and they hang in there and they keep sticking by. They could stick there for 30 years or however long they can, or whatever. It's hard to explain it, but it really causes a lot of problems for people. It really does.
Well, I can't even imagine, but it would seem that children whose parent, mother or father, was convicted, besides the humiliation they would feel from whatever, playmates, schoolmates, whatever, but the doubts they would have as to whether their parent was innocent, or if they thought they were innocent, all the trauma that child must grow up with. And as you point out, the spouses, who wind up not being able to be faithful, all right, to them, and give up on them. What all that must do to the inmate, all right, to the one who is
I mean,
sitting
some
in
people
prison.
just exit out. Some people just X out. They just check out, and they just figure, well, there's nothing I can do about it. They just abandon the person who's in prison, or because they can't handle it any other way, because they're so overwhelmed, and they get so discouraged if the thing doesn't get resolved within 10 or 20 years. I mean, 10 years, say. They're like, well, I don't know about this, and they maybe deep down they don't give up, but they just can't do it day after day, because it never goes away. You know what I mean? The person always calls from prison. They always have a terrible story to tell you. They always tell you how, somebody just got shot in the cell next to them, or somebody just, got sick and died, or somebody got in a fight, or, they don't have any food today because they're on lockdown, or they just have all these like horrible stories every single day. And like, sometimes people just can't handle it,
Well,
So that's,
what supports, you mentioned the Innocence Project, all right? And I guess this is what you're trying to do as well. How do you support them?
well, the Innocence Network, the Innocence Project, is all around the country, and it's so wonderful. I mean, they're primarily a legal clinic, but they do help. Once the person gets exonerated, they do help people to find jobs and find support. They do offer a little bit of support to family members, but their primary aim is to help individuals who are in prison who are wrongly convicted, if that person qualifies for their criterion. And they're very, very dedicated. They're very sacrificial. They're excellent, but they can't help everybody. And so then, as far as family members and stuff, I haven't found. I think there might be one or two other support groups that are just sort of grassroots support groups that might help family members of the wrongly convicted, but I haven't found a lot of them. And as far as I know, having been a friend to somebody in prison for many years who's wrongly convicted, I didn't find anything when I was going through the worst of it for myself. There was nowhere for me to turn. I don't know if I would have participated in a group anyway, but there just wasn't anybody. There wasn't anywhere to go at all. And I think that's awful, because what are people supposed to do? Because if you try to talk to somebody else about it, they'll say things like, how do you know that person is innocent? Oh, you're kind of wasting your time. Look, you have a life to live. Why don't you just forget about it? And all that kind of stuff. So you can't, eventually you don't talk to anybody. You just decide, well, it's not worth talking to anybody, because it's only going to be discouraging. So people, your world gets smaller and smaller. I had a mother tell me her husband was a professor at the university, and she said, well, after my son got convicted, we just lost all our friends. We didn't go out socially anymore. We didn't do anything except stay home and pray the rosary, and I don't know, just we didn't go out much with our friends anymore, and things like that.
So how do you support these families or these prisoners through your ministry?
Well, we're in the process of starting an online support group, which is we're gonna try to start it in July, and it will be like a Zoom group or something like that. And we're going to try to have it like be a faith-based group where we read some, scripture or something, and then have a theme that we talk about, like faith, for instance, and then have people share what helps them. So it won't be so much a time for people to talk about their personal problems in depth, but it'll be a time of encouragement and hopefully inspiration and support. So we're trying to do that. And then I try to talk to some people if they call me, my family members, mothers or brothers, or anybody that calls me that wants to talk about what they're experiencing, what they need. I try to do that.
So let's come back to your ministry and how are you sustained? How were you inspired to continue this, and how does it tie into your spirituality?
I also wrote this little booklet, which we're just trying to get circulated now. It's called The Open Gate to Paradise, because, the symbol of the open gate is like anybody in prison wants the gates to get opened. They just wait for that day. Their loved ones wait for that day. But really, what it's all about is, regardless of whatever path anybody's on, whether they're in prison, out of prison, we're all in some kind of prison. We're all trying to find release. We're all trying to find relief and release and freedom and all that in some way or another. So to me, this little, segue or whatever about wrongly convicted people is like, we're all kind of caught in a trap in life on this earth. So we're all looking for freedom and the way out. So to me, that's the divine will. That's to embrace God's will. One time I went to see this nun in May. She was a Carmelite. Her name was Sister Margaret. She's a hermit. And she said to me once, I said, well, what do you think about this story? And she said, I thought she was going to say something really like wise and profound. And she said, oh, well, just embrace God's will. And I was like kind of disappointed. I was like, wow. But then I realized later on, that's such a wonderful thing that she said that. Now I understand why she said it, because to me, we all have something in our life that we want out of. We want freedom from. We want it to change, or, we wish we could get rid of the cross, or we wish we could, solve a certain thing. But really, it's in God's hands. We all have a certain mission in life. Let's say that. We all have a certain specific task that we were put here on this planet for. So if God allows something to happen in a person's life, whether it be a family and friend of a wrongly convicted person, or a wrongly convicted person themselves, or somebody that has a serious illness, or somebody that has had a divorce, or any number of tragedies that a person could be facing that they really, really wish they didn't have to in a certain way. That it's just like if we could just embrace the cross and embrace God's will and realize that there is the open gate to paradise. It's embracing and clinging to the cross and accepting it, but not in a miserable way, but in a really, it's like the cross is actually our freedom. I know this sounds crazy, but it's like it actually opens the doors of a person's heart. It opened the door to my heart, and just makes it's like that your path is kind of like different then. You're like, it's almost like your path is strewn with blessings, instead of just being a miserable road for the rest of your life. It's like you're on the road to heaven. Your life is filled with hope. Your life is filled with freedom, and all your path is strewn with wonderful blessings everywhere you turn. I'm not trying to paint a Pollyanna picture. I'm not saying that you're not suffering, but it's like you're not concentrating on the suffering anymore. You're concentrating on all the other people you wish that could share in this life with you. You're thinking, all these other people, oh, I wish they could have this joy that I have. That's all you're thinking about. It's like, it's different. I don't know how to explain it, but I tried to write about it in this little booklet that I have. And then I tried to explain that, like, the divine will for whatever anybody's suffering is like that. And I don't mean that we're all just trying to ignore reality. We're not. We're embracing it. We're embracing our life the way it is now, whatever it is. In the eternal now, we're embracing things the way they are, but we're very happy because we know that we're on the path to heaven. Saint Therese used to believe in heaven. She used to say heaven was her great future, her great hope and everything. And then there was a time at the end of her life, maybe God allowed her to go through this special desolation, which was even darker than the dark night of the spirit or something, because, she said, I don't know if there's a heaven anymore. And she was in so much pain. Remember, she had her medicine up by her bed, and she said, I was in so much pain that the thought crossed my mind that maybe I should, maybe I could end my life and just forget about it. But, what the Lord allowed her to feel is this great, great darkness. Like, what if there really isn't a heaven? So, she started off like feeling this great comfort of the fatherland, thinking about it, but then she kind of got plunged into this, dark, like she was underground in a dark tunnel where there was nothing. But then she embraced all that, and her last words were, Jesus, I love you. I don't know how to explain I don't know how to put it into words what I'm trying to say, but it's just all that somehow is really what's important, all that put together, all of it. Because we're not trying to paint a pie in the sky picture like, oh, there's a great heaven and everything's great. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that the road to heaven is the cross, and that is the gate. That's the open gate to paradise. That is what really will help. That is really what our salvation is about. So it doesn't really matter in a certain sense, with all due respect to anybody that's suffering anything. Like, in a certain sense, it kind of doesn't really matter what is going on. Like, I think about Maximilian Kolbe, and you think, well, how did he actually walk to the starvation bunker? How did he do that? Like, how? And how did he sing when he was starving to death? I think about it a lot. I think about him a lot. How did he do that? But he was so given over to the divine will and to Our Lady and to what Our Lady wanted that he just almost was carried by Our Lady, almost was lifted up to heaven. I'm not saying he didn't feel the pain or the scorching sun or the terrible abuse in the camp, in the concentration camp or anything. I'm sure he did, just like we all feel everything. But it's like our focus gets away from there. And then we just start focusing on God. Like, I think somewhere in you probably know, in the book of heaven, Jesus told Louisa, keep one eye on me and one eye on what you're doing. I don't know where it is, you probably know. But that's really important, Keep one eye on God and keep one eye on what you're doing. What am I doing? Am I focusing on the right things, or am I distracted? It's I don't know. I don't know how else to word it very well, but.
Well, it sounds like the inspiration is certainly carrying you, and the power of your belief is contagious, right? And it's edifying. So thank you for that. How are you being supported in this? You're talking about printed material, you're talking about website outreach, online ministry, all of that takes money, and as far as I know, you're pretty much all alone. So how do
I just
people help
depend on
you?
divine providence. That's basically it. And I pray and I just ask the Lord and the divine will to do. Like, there's that thing in the divine will that says, let me do. That let me do thing. That is so important. That's everything. That is absolutely everything. Because if he does it, if the divine will, the Holy Trinity does it, then the worry and the fear and all that goes away. You know what I mean? Because it's not my job to provide for our ministry. It's God's ministry. So I kind of just say, well, whatever you want, I don't know. It's a practice. Father Iannuzzi always says we have to practice the virtues, We have to practice detachment. We have to practice, me. Okay, I'm going to say me. I have to practice detachment. I have to practice humility. I have to abase myself. And I make a practice of laying on the floor and putting my face on the ground, and remind myself before I go out in the morning, before I engage in conversation, or when I think something is going to be really difficult, when I'm anticipating that I don't feel well enough to do something, or I don't have the physical strength to do it, or or whatever it might be, I just ask the Lord, you do it, please do it. So it's really, in a way, life becomes a lot easier, It becomes easy. How Jesus says, your yoke, my yoke is easy, my burden is light, or whatever like that. it is kind of like that. I'm not saying it's, I'm not saying that I'm not saying you don't feel pain or anything like that. I'm not trying to say that, but it's like the focus isn't on the pain. Like I read this thing, and I think it was yesterday in the calendar reading from the book of heaven. I think it was yesterday. It said, Jesus told Louisa that, I don't know the reference points, you probably do, but it was saying, how do you suffer? The way you suffer is that you don't look at the cause of your suffering, and you don't look at the suffering. You don't look at who's causing you this suffering, and you don't look at the suffering. You look at the good that it's going to do. So I know that sounds like, oh, pie in the sky, oh, it's going to do so good. But really, that's Jesus told Louisa, if you do that, you'll be able to suffer it with patience, and you'll also be able to suffer with an unconquered heart. So I just thought that was just wonderful. Because I know if I get focused on, oh, who's causing me the suffering or what's causing me, then I get all trapped up. I get really lost. I get all wrapped up in myself. It just doesn't work, or then if I start thinking, oh, this is really painful, and then I focus on the pain. I mean, you don't want to ignore the pain. You don't want to pretend it doesn't, you don't want to say, well, I'm not in pain, because that's not true. You want to let it be there, but you don't want to delve into it. Like in Our Lady says in Medjugorje, don't delve into your problems. I was like an expert person. I always delved into my problems, always. I would just delve into them and try to figure them out, try to this, try to that, and it just gets worse. So I think what Jesus said to Louisa is I think that's just wonderful. Just think of all the souls that we can help. If you want to bring relief to somebody that you love, if you really want to help them, you just fuse yourself with the divine will and offer just say, this is for the divine, everything I have, everything, my breath, my heartbeat, my steps, my body, my soul, my mind, everything is in the divine will. So you're helping, you can bilocate to that person that you love. You don't have to worry about them anymore. It's just so wonderful that God is so great that he gave us this gift for this time that we're living in this time that is so much in need for the world. It's unbelievable. It's like, how could anybody keep it to themselves? How could anybody not be happy and grateful and thankful and just, I don't know, want to get on the street corner and tell the whole world about it? It's so, I don't know. Does that make any sense, or does that just sound crazy? But I mean, that's what I'm experiencing.
Lindy, you're anointed to be that street corner preacher. That's for sure.
I don't know. I'm so happy. It's so wonderful. God gave us everything in the divine will, everything we could ever need or want. He gave us the command prayer. He gave us the rounds. He gave us so many things to use to bring about his kingdom quickly. We don't know what that word quickly means, but it's just,
well, we're going to have to come back for more of this.
Happy about.
This is indeed the good news. All right. But I also know that you need the money to pay for all of this. And so I'd like to appeal to anyone listening to consider supporting this on fire evangelist for God in this wonderful work for those who are without hope, to give them hope, to give us all hope, because this is what the church needs, like another little Francis of Assisi, all right, who it's in the poverty and in the trust of God that's holding up the whole church at these terrible times. So how can people support your ministry, Lindy?
They could go to lightofhope.net. That's our website. They could go there and they could take a look at it. And if they feel like they want to support us, they can just support us. There's a donation button which goes to PayPal.
And volunteers, are you in need?
Oh yeah, we always need volunteers. We need volunteers to do things. People can work remotely because I always have a lot of research and reading to do. There's always something somebody could do to help us, and I'm always looking for volunteers. And they don't have to live in this general locality of Scranton, PA. There's so many ways people can help us.
Well, I'm happy for you. I'm happy that the prisoners have a voice, and that all of us have this gift of the divine will, and that you're using it so well. So thank you, Lindy, and thank you, Lord, right? Thank you,
Yeah,
God.
that's right.
All right, so until next time, once again, thank you, Lindy, for sharing with us. And I hope all of you who are hearing are inspired, all right? Whether you help her or not, have hope, have faith, all right? The best is yet to be. Amen.
Amen.
All right, God bless you, dear.
Thank you.
The woman in the sun's reflection helps me find my direction. The hand that held the Savior now is guiding me. Just for this moment, my heart is open. I'm ready to hear your voice. Mary, my mother, Mary, my mother, help me to be like Jesus and show me the way. When all that I believe has been tested and I'm unsure, I remember how you watched your baby die in agony. You stayed by his side with faith that did not fade. So on my knees I find the strength to pray. Mary, my mother, Mary, my mother, help me to be like Jesus and teach me how to pray. Mary, my mother, Mary, my mother, help me to be like Jesus and show